Lippman, foreign policy expert back here on the Live Zone. Harley, it's been quite some time. Good to see you again, my friend.
Good to see you as well.
So, Harley, I'm curious. Let's start off with how phase one of the ceasefire has gone thus far. Your take on all of it?
I think it's going incredibly well given all the challenges. You have Israeli hostages who have been released, and nobody is really being killed anymore, with some exceptions when you have Hamas terrorists opening fire on Israeli soldiers, but these are rare and somewhat isolated. Other than that, there's no more fighting on a large scale, which was killing Israelis, Hamas, innocent Palestinians. So overall, I give it an A.
Yeah. On the flip side of the coin, Harley, and I'm playing devil's advocate here, there are some who are stating that since the ceasefire began back on October 10th, Israel has broken it more than 590 times, killing at least 360 Palestinians and sending the total death toll in Gaza from 2 years of attacks above 70,000. Your response to that?
Well, that data is coming from a Hamas-controlled entity. That's the Gaza Ministry of Health. So obviously that can't be reliable, and it's actually the opposite. Israel has not violated the ceasefire, except when it's been attacked by Hamas fighters, or Israel feels threatened by Hamas fighters that are about to attack Israel. So other than that, Israel is honoring the ceasefire. But as we've seen in the last war, Hamas has won the propaganda war, and they continue to do so, even though the reality is very different.
Harley, let's talk about the aid, or perhaps the lack thereof, currently in the Gaza region. Does that remain in play? Would you say that the aid is making its way through those who are in dire need?
Yeah, there are 600 trucks that are going through regularly on a daily basis. Before the war, about 500 trucks were going in. So it's still a challenge when you have a country as destroyed as Gaza. So think about how difficult that is. But food is going in. The problem is, as it was before during the war, is that Hamas is stealing the food, because they steal the food and then charge exorbitant prices to the poor Palestinians in Gaza. And that's how they raise money to fund their war. So there was even a report from the UN, which is more pro-Palestinian and more pro-Hamas than they are pro-Israeli. And even they said 85% of their trucks with food supplies was stolen by Hamas. So it speaks for itself.
Harley, we know that at the end of December, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is due to sit down yet again with President Trump. The question I pose to you is, what needs to happen in order for the meeting to be deemed a success?
Well, that speaks to the next phase that you were referring to. The next phase in the 20-point peace plan put together by Trump with allies and friends in the Middle East is that Hamas disarms and Israel withdraws. But now Hamas is very clever. So they're saying, oh, they'll only disarm if Israel withdraws first. But that's clearly not going to happen. Israel controls nearly half of Gaza, which, as part of the peace plan, Israel said it will not occupy Gaza. It will not annex any land from Gaza. But this is part of a phased peace plan. So for it to be a success would be where somehow they're getting Hamas to disarm. And they talk, and Hamas talks about freezing their weapons or putting them away, but that's where the devil's in the details. How are we going to know how many weapons they're really hiding? And when they freeze it, who's going to control it? So if Hamas wants to get access to it, could they get to it quickly, which would make a concession there meaningless if Hamas could quickly get their weapons back? So the key part to this plan is disarming Hamas, and then Israel also is required to withdraw from Gaza. This sounds like a fair and reasonable arrangement, but I don't. It's going to be extremely difficult to implement.
Yeah, and yet again, I would suspect that the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will face a lot of flack as a result of that, should that not happen. Would you agree?
I don't see how any Israeli prime minister could stay in office if they leave an armed Hamas in power, for the simple reason that Hamas has repeatedly said they'll do October 7th again many times. So no nation could ignore a warning that threatens their existence, or at least threatens their civilian population. So Israel may have to do something if the international community doesn't, which is going to be, but there's no appetite in Israel for any war to continue in Gaza. So it's going to be very difficult. Now, that said, there are three options that one could follow. One is that Hamas could surrender. They could perhaps be given safe passage out of the country, or there could be some group that could come in and be able to take their weapons. But that's going to prove very difficult because nobody wants to go into Gaza in terms of reconstruction or peacekeeping if Hamas is still armed.
Yet again, Mr. Harley Lippman, foreign policy expert, joining us right here on the Fox 5 Live Zone. Sir, it is always a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. All right, folks, we'll take a quick break. On the flip side of that break, could it be the Fed reducing interest rates? We'll discuss that next and so much more right here on the Live Zone.